Live now, so we're going to get started. Just so that everyone knows, we are recording this event, but we're the ones talking, so it should be okay. Hello and good morning, and welcome to our webinar, How to Move Your Classroom Training Online. We're very happy that you could all make it this morning. Before we start, I'm going to introduce us, our company, the presentation, and how this platform works a little bit so that everything goes smoothly. And then we hope that you enjoy and learn a lot. So to begin, we are Share PLM. We're a technology education company, and we strive to help other businesses structure and develop their training. So we specialize in product lifecycle management and getting users up to date with their IT systems and softwares. So I'm Heather, and I'm from the United States, but I live and I work in Spain. I studied marketing and Spanish, and I also have a background in education, specifically bilingual education. So for Share, I am the copywriter. So I create and I edit all the content to perfect it for our clients. My coworker, Miriam, will be the main presenter today. She is from Switzerland and she lives in Barcelona, and she's our senior consultant at Share PLM. She has a background in change management, consulting, and user experience projects. Okay, next slide. So in today's program, we'll have an introduction, and then we'll go over the 4 steps of moving your classroom training online. And if you're new to this platform, click meeting. I want to point out that there is a chat box. It should be in your right bottom corner of the screen. And this is where you'll be able to ask us questions or make comments. So let's test that. So if everyone would type in their name and maybe where they are in the world right now, we can see that everybody can hear us and that things are going well so far. Okay. Cool. Netherlands, UK, Belgium, France, Sweden. Wow, all right. We've got people from all over. India, France, India. Wow. Netherlands, Belgium.
Nice.
Germany. Wow. Okay, that's great. We're really, really happy that you all could make it today. I also want to mention that if you want to ask a question, or if you want to ask a question in the chat box during the presentation, make sure to use the question mark, because this will highlight the question in blue, and we will be able to look at it later in the question and answer discussion at the end of the presentation. We also will answer one question after each step through the presentation, and if we have a lot of questions, we will answer the rest at the end. So we will get to your questions, but we'll try to keep the presentation moving and stay on schedule. So the last thing before we start, we're going to do a quick survey. Let's put that on. Okay, you should now see the survey. It's just one question about your current training situation. We want to get a feel for what motivation everyone had to join us today. I think we have a few more left to vote. Okay, I think if everyone got to vote, For almost everyone? So we have a lot of people that are currently moving their training and a few that are thinking about doing so. Okay, great. All right. Let's move on then. These are the results that we had.
Cool.
Okay, great.
Cool.
So
right.
Let's go back to our presentation and we can get started. So I'll let Miriam begin with all the exciting material that we have for you today. So whenever you're ready.
So thank you, Heather, for the introduction. And hi, everyone. I'm Miriam, and today I will be presenting the webinar, How to Move Your Classroom Training Online. So maybe some of you are here thinking about moving the training, or you're currently moving also because of what's happening currently with the coronavirus pandemic. It might have somehow put you in a situation where your training have been canceled, or simply it has accelerated a trend that is already happening for many organizations, which is remote working. And moving your training to an online format has, of course, a lot of advantage. So it can reduce cost. It also enable you to scale your training to a bigger audience. But it's not that simple, because obviously in your classroom training, you have a social dimension. You can ask questions to your teacher. You can easily do an 8-hour training and people are going to be able to keep up. But if you want to transfer that to a online setting, it's going to be a bit of a different way of delivering your training, because webinars are hours of slide after slides of bulleted information with no engaging activities or social interaction. That's not going to yield the result that you want. It's just going to make your learner feel disengaged, and it's highly likely that they won't remember most of what has been taught during the class. So the question is, how do you create an engaging, efficient online learning experience? And mostly, how can you maintain the social and interactive experience of a classroom training into an online environment? So in today's webinar, I will show you 4 essential steps to follow when you want to move your classroom training to an online format. So let's jump right into it. So what are those steps? The first one is to define your learning objective. So this is going to serve as the foundation of your learning program. Then we'll see how you can bite-size your training. And after that, we'll learn how you can design activities that are practical and that are for on-the-job application. And the last step will be to see how you can create or curate content to support your training efforts. All right, so step number 1, define learning objective. So as I just mentioned, your learning objectives are going to be the foundation of your course. They will be here to tell you what's important, and they will guide you in your conversion process. And even if you have already learning objective defined, I think it's a great opportunity to actually go back to them and revisit your learning objective, because you will get to see if they're still valid. And you might actually uncover some significant challenges that you want to address before converting them into a live format. And also keep in mind that learning objectives are not the same as an agenda or what you want to cover. Instead, they're a reflection of what the learner needs to know or to do afterwards. So when you are designing your learning objective, ask yourself the following questions. What do learners need to know or to do at the end of a session? What skills should they have? What change behavior should they be? And what do they need to start doing or stop doing? So, how do you write well-defined objective? Well, well-written learning objective should indicate something that the learner will actually do in the real world, and something you can tell when they've done it. So when you are designing your learning objective, you want to make sure first that they're outcome oriented. What does that mean? It means that you want to make it explicit, clear for the learner what skills, what knowledge are they going to acquire by the end of the training. And so you want to make sure that you start your sentence with an action-oriented verb. For example, learner will be able to ... Try to avoid sentences that will start with learner will know, learner will understand, because you can't really measure, you can't really understand what knowing or understand mean. It's too wide. So make sure that they are precise and outcome-oriented. Second point, you also want to make sure that they are meaningful and relevant to your audience. And that's a key point if you want to make sure that your audience is going to be engaged, because your learners should be able to see clearly the connection between your learning objective and the day-to-day work. If they can understand how is that going to serve them in the day-to-day work, you're much more likely to have your audience engaged and wanting to learn and wanting to pay attention. And finally, you want to write objectives that are achievable based on your audience. So here you will have to know what's the skill or the knowledge level of the people you're giving your training to. And of course, design objectives that can be achieved within the time frame given. If you set learning objectives that are too ambitious, you're just going to leave your learner frustrated. All right, so let's look at an example so you can have a better idea of what I'm talking about here. All right, so for example, maybe one of your learning objectives can sound something like, at the end of this training session, a participant will know how to use project in the PLM system. So here we can already spot the will know how. And as I mentioned before, this is not a good verb to formulate your learning objective because it's too wide, it's too general. How exactly do I know that I know enough about using project in the PLM system? And people are not going to be able to relate. They're not going to be able to really understand how is that going to impact them, how is that going to serve them in their day-to-day job. So instead, try to formulating it a bit differently. For example, here we have, at the end of this training session, a participant will be able to search and find specific projects, create a new project with or without a template, and add team members to a project. So that is much better because our learner will know exactly by the end what they need to learn, what they need to do. And they will be able to know, okay, so I'm able to search and find project. I reached that objective, but I'm still unsure about how I create a new project with a template. So maybe I can go back to it. I can ask more questions. And also learner will be able to see how it is relevant to their job. Maybe they're working with project, and so they will be, yeah, actually, I need to know how to create project because that's going to be the base with what I'm going to work with my team member. So they're going to see how this is going to be useful for them in the day-to-day work. And obviously, you need to make sure that if that was your learning objective, that your audience will already have some basic understanding on how to navigate in your PLM system. So how to log in, how to just where is the menu, and so on. All right. So before we jump into the next step, let's just have a little summary of the points, the important point about this step number 1. So third thing to do when you start to move your training online, or even if you're already into the process, it's really go back to your learning objective. And even if you already have them defined, review them, make sure they're clear, make sure that they're not just an agenda, but really a reflection of what the learner is going to learn, is going to be able to know or do afterwards. Also, make sure that your objectives are written in a way that is outcome-oriented, meaningful and relevant to your audience, and achievable. And remember that expected outcome in your learning objective should be stated with an action verb. All right, so before I jump into the next step, if there is any question, that's the time. Otherwise, we can have all the questions by the end. All right, I think that's good for now. So I will jump into the step number 2. Bite-size your training. So now that you have determined what you want in your learning program, what you want your learning program to achieve, now it's time to create bite-sized learning experience, which can be described as model or lesson. So basically here, what we're going to do is that if, for example, you had a 8-hour classroom training, we're going to see how we can break down this 8-hour classroom training into several models. And each of those models or lessons should have a distinct set of learning objectives that define the purpose of that experience and its outcome. So we're basically going to repeat the process that we did for the first step of defining the general learning outcome. And this time we're going to do it for each model. Try not to have too many learning objectives for each model, because the more you have, the less likely you're going to be to achieve them all and to leave your learner frustrated. So try to keep it to 1 or 2 objectives per model. And why should you bite-size your program? Well, simply because 1 minute of classroom time does not equal to 1 minute of virtual time. There is a very common mistake that when converting your offline training to an online format, to think that an 8-hour instructor-led class will be an 8-hour live online virtual session. And this is simply not true, because when we are in front of a screen, we get more likely to get screen fatigue. And also it's so much easier to get distracted. I mean, when we're by ourselves in front of our screen, no one's going to see if we're actually reading an article on our social media, if we're petting our dog, going to make ourselves a coffee. And we have shorter attention span when we are in front of our screen. So that's why we need to make sure that our live online class should never be more than 60 to 90 minutes. If you go over 90 minutes, you're highly likely to lose the attention of your learners. So how do you bite-size your program? Well, there are obviously many ways to do it. But in today's webinar, I want to recommend you 2 approaches. The first one is webinar series, and the second one is the blended approach. So let's look first at the first approach, the webinar series approach. So with this approach, for example, you have this 1-day workshop that is an 8-hour course, and you're going to convert it into 8 webinar series of 60 minutes each. Depending on how fast you want your learner to get up to speed, you could decide to spread it over 8 weeks with a webinar a week. But obviously, if you want your learners to be up to speed quickly, you could also put 2 webinars per week, and then you will finish it in 4 weeks. So that's really up to you. But each webinar should not be more than 60 minutes or 90 minutes. Also, when you choose this option, it's important that you try to keep the social aspect of a classroom training within your webinar. So in the next step, when we're going to talk about activities, I'll go a bit more in detail about what kind of activities you can do in a webinar. But just to give you some idea now, for example, you could start with an icebreaker activity at the beginning of your webinar, like we did now, but you can do something a bit more interactive, asking your participant to type in the chat what's their favorite thing about being quarantined, or something funny, something that will get them engaged. It's actually quite important that at the beginning of your webinar, you get your learner engaged. It's going to be a bit of a make or break kind of thing. Then during the webinar, you can test them with polls. So polls is what we did at the beginning of the session when we asked you which situation you were in with your training. Well, you can do the same throughout your entire webinar. And so you can ask them questions that are relevant on what you just learned. And so you will keep them more engaged, you will keep them participating and not just passively consuming content. Also, and that will depend on which webinar platform you use, but many webinar platforms have what is called a breakout room. And this breakout room will allow you to replicate team activities within a webinar setting. So what is breakout room? They allow you to put a group of smaller participants into an online room so that they can work as a team on an assignment that you gave them, or just maybe you want them to discuss some point you made, and then you can bring them back to the general chat, the general group, and everyone can share their finding or their opinion. So the benefit of this webinar approach is that it's much faster and easier to roll out. So if you are looking for a quick transition, if you really need to get your classroom training up and running quickly, this is definitely a good approach for you. But if you do have more time and you want to create an experience that is maybe more immersive, more engaging, I will definitely recommend you go with the approach number 2, which is the blended learning approach. So with this approach, it's going to be a mix of live and self-paced activities. So if we go back to our example of the one-day workshop, the 8-hour workshop, here, instead of breaking it into 8 webinars, we broke it into 3 webinars of 60-90 minutes each. And in between those webinars, we have added some activities. Those activities, they're not just going to be here to complement what has been taught during the webinar. No, they actually substitute of webinars. So those activities are actually going to be a model in themselves. And you might be wondering, so how do you know which model belongs in the virtual session and which model can be moved to a pre-class or post-class assignment? Well, again, here you have to go back to your learning objective to guide you in this process. Go back to the learning objective that you've decided for each model and ask yourself, how will I know that your learner have achieved this objective? Is it through observation? Do you need to see them practice a skill? Or can you simply assess them through a knowledge check? Let's see an example so you can understand what I'm talking about here. All right, so here we have an example of a PLM onboarding course. Traditionally, it used to be a 4-hour instructor-led training class, and now we want to move it online. So the first step is to break it down into model. So we decided that our model number 1 was going to be a little introduction about the PLM. We're going to explain some terminology that are in the PLM, the business role, and so on. Model number 2 is going to be an introduction to the user interface. So we'll show them how to log in, where's the menu, where are the tabs, how they can get support, and so on. And model number 3 is how to use the search function in the PLM so that they understand how they can search for parts, project, team member, and so on. So now we want to go for the blended approach with this model division. So the next step we did is to ask ourselves, so for model number 1, the introduction, the glossary, and so on, is this knowledge objective? Yes, because basically, if we wanted, we could simply test them with a quiz to check their understanding. We don't need to see them reciting the glossary or what are the business role. This could easily be some pre-class reading assignment that you could send them before your webinar. You could send maybe a PowerPoint presentation you have, or just some document for them to go through. And you can then have a little quiz either at the beginning of this webinar or even send it included with the email you send them. Then for the model number 2, the introduction to the user interface. We thought, okay, is that going to generate a lot of questions? Probably yes, because it's a new platform. They don't know nothing about it. It's highly likely that some people even have trouble logging in. And also, participants will definitely benefit from hearing other participant questions and doubts. So here, there's clearly a benefit of showing this on an online live webinar format. And finally, the last one, using search in the PLM. This is a bit more versatile. We could also do it as a webinar, but because it's a more defined subject, you could easily just do a little video recording of you showing how to use search in the PLM. Maybe you can also have a PowerPoint presentation with the steps, and you could also test them with a quiz or simply asking them to show a screenshot of them having searched something successfully. So this one, if you wanted to, you could move it to a post-class assignment. All right, I hope that helped you to understand a little bit how to bite-size your training. Let's look at some of the key takeaway of this step. So first key takeaway it's important that you bite-size your program into model. As I said, we don't want to have an 8-hour-long webinar. Otherwise, you're definitely going to lose your learners' attention, and they're probably not going to remember a lot out of your training. And each model should have their own set of learning objectives. And remember, a live class should never be more than 60 to 90 minutes. There are two approaches to dividing your program. You can either go for the webinar series or for the blended learning. The advantage of the webinar series is that it's more suited for fast rollouts, but the blended approach is more engaging and immersive. The learner will probably get more out of it. The only downside is that it requires more work from your side. All right, before I jump into the next step, is there any question here? All right, perfect. So I can jump into step number 3. Design activities for practical on-the-job application. So we just looked at 2 different approaches to bite-sizing your program. Now we'll see how you can design engaging but mostly useful activities to make sure that your learners are integrating the knowledge and also to make sure that you're keeping them engaged. So we'll look first at activities that can be run within a webinar, and then we'll look at activities, or how I call them, assignment, that can be done outside the webinars, in between the webinars. All right, so first one, webinar activities. Actually, the process of selecting activities is very similar to designing a traditional training class. What's going to be different, obviously, is the tool available to you in your technical platform. So here you're going to be using chat, polling, file transfer, screen sharing, and so on. Some activity in a traditional training class can easily be translated into a live online environment. So for example, if in your teacher-led training you used to have a classroom peer discussion activity, you could easily translate it into an online peer chat activity using the breakout room I mentioned earlier. Or if you used to have a competition between 2 different teams to answer some questions, you could repeat the same experience online by using polls question. You could divide your audience in 2, 3, 4 groups, and then they will all answer poll questions. And also, if you used to have a live demonstration, you can definitely do the same using screen sharing on your webinar, during your webinar. So basically here, the only limitation you have is your imagination, creativity, and of course, the features that are available in your webinar tool. So that's it for the webinar. Now let's look at the assignment. So how can you design effective assignments? So the assignments are the activities that we're going to do in between webinars. The best assignments are those that are designed to have an authentic deliverable, one that will likely be used in the real world and has significant relevance to the learner job. Also, when you're designing assignment, we also want to here to try to maintain that social component. So I come back a lot to this social component because that is probably one of the downside of online training is that we can feel a bit isolated when we're doing training online. So we want to try to always introduce an element of social learning. And here with assignment, one way to do it will be to organize collaborative assignments. So for example, you could put people in group and ask them to collaborate on an assignment. You could create collaborative assignment that involve delegation of responsibilities, perspective taking, or coordination amongst different roles and geographies. Also, another idea to introduce a bit of social learning in your assignment is to incorporate peer feedback as a follow-up assignment. So here, for example, you could ask your learner to create a project using a template, and once they finish, they have to take a screenshot. And instead of sending it to you for you to make sure they've accomplished the assignment, they know how to create the project, you could pair them in group or in pairs, and they will correct each other. So that's a great way, because the learners still get a bit of this social dynamic into the online training. They can learn from each other. And also, it means less work for you, because instead of you having to correct everything, they will help each other. So when you are designing your assignment, try, oh, sorry, skip a slide. Oh, well, here, sorry, I had a little technical issue. So here, when you're designing your assignment, try to follow two guidelines. First, try to provide opportunities for immediate practice application of concept. So here, when you're going to send them activities that are outside of the webinar, it might be, for example, to watch a video, to read a presentation or an article. And what you want to do is that you always want to have, after that, some way for them to apply what they've just learned. So it can be through a quiz, or it can be through actually creating, here we have as an example, creating an e-book from scratch. Obviously, you want to make it happen in a test or a learning environment, and then take a screenshot and either send it to you, or if you decide to go for the peer feedback, they could send it to another of their colleague and correct each other. But that will be a perfect assignment that will follow maybe a video of you showing step by step how to create an e-book or a PowerPoint. And also, you want them to have clearly stated instruction and a clear process for completion. And also here, another example, they could create an engineering datasheet within the PLM system, download it, and share it with you or with another colleague. All right. So the key takeaway from this lesson is when you are designing webinar activities, you can truly inspire yourself from the one you used to do in a classroom setting. You can just see how they can be converted to an online format using the tools that are available to you, which are mainly chat, polling, screen sharing. Then remember that the best assignments are those that are designed to have an authentic deliverable, one that will likely be used in the real world and has a significant relevance to the learner work. And also, always try to incorporate community in the learning experience, be it through your webinar or through your assignment. It's really going to make your learner more engaged, and they're not going to feel as lonely in the learning experience. All right, is there any question here, or can I jump to the last step? All right, cool. Oh, I think maybe there's something.
Yes, maybe 1 second. I'm seeing someone typing.
Yeah. Or maybe not. Oh, we just have one more step. So if you have a question, we can also
yeah, you can answer it, and we'll get to it after.
By the end of the step.
Okay,
all right.
Perfect.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So last step. So with all what I told you, maybe you are under the impression that you will need to create a lot of new content in order to be able to move your training online. And that is not necessarily true. So, for example, if you decided to go with the blended approach, you will definitely need to create some extra material to send to your students, be it the videos, the homework, and so on. But instead of having to think you need to create everything from scratch, first try to see how you can leverage pre-existing content. So maybe your enterprise has some kind of subscription to, I don't know, LinkedIn Learning or other education platform where there's maybe a course or even a lesson that can be relevant for your students. So you can refer them to this one. Or if you read any article or podcast, or if you found any infographic, that will be a really good way to include this material as an assignment. You could ask them to read an article and then ask them to highlight what are the 5 key takeaway of this article, and then share it with one of the colleagues or share it during the next webinar session you're going to have. And obviously, there is a point where you will need to create some content. But here again, you really don't need to start from scratch. For example, if you have some existing webinar recording, be it from you or from another colleague, you could easily take them and edit the parts that are interesting for you. And you can just maybe take out 10 minutes of this webinar and send it as an assignment to your audience. They should watch that webinar, and always with a little exercise where they have to apply what they just learned in the webinar. Then also, for example, you have the slides that you might have been using during your training, your classroom training. And oftentimes what happens with slide is that if they don't have the content, the context with it, it might seem a bit, it doesn't tell you much. Like if you took my presentation without me talking over it, it will give you an idea, but you will miss a lot of what needs to be communicated. So what you can do here is that you can still use your slide and you can also take a video of you on your smartphone and just give some instructions, give some content. That's going to make your course much more engaging, and also it will feel more personal, which is also something that we want to try to maintain in our online learning experience. All right. People cannot hear me? Sorry. Oh, okay, lost. Okay, where did you stop hearing? Sorry. Okay. Did you hear when I was talking about the creation part, or when did the sound cut? All right, so should I go back about, did you hear the curation? Okay, I repeat this slide. All right, okay, cool. Thank you. Sorry about this little problem. All right, so I was saying, so about the curation. So when you come to this step of having to create content for your assignment, you don't have to start from scratch. So first, start with curation, which means try to leverage the pre-existing content that is out there. So maybe you can use some article that you read that you found was interesting and could actually really really help you learner. And you can also use podcasts, infographic, or if you have any YouTube video that you think is relevant. And in the case of an article, you could take an article as an assignment and then ask your audience to say what's the 5 key takeaway from this article. And that could either be a homework they could share with their colleague if you decide to go with the peer feedback option, or they could even share it as an icebreaker for your next webinar. Then, if you need to create new content for your assignment, well, you don't have to start from scratch here. For example, if you already have some existing webinar recording and a part of it could be interesting for your audience, you could edit it, take out the part that is relevant, make a little video out of it, and then send that as an assignment to your audience to watch in between webinars. Of course, you always want to try to add by the end of this little video a way they can start applying the newly acquired knowledge. So maybe it's about doing some step in the PLM, or maybe it's just about answering some questions. Also, the slides that you have, the slide that you will normally be using in your classroom training, you don't, for example, those slides, without me talking over it, they will miss a bit of content. So it's not, you cannot just send them a PowerPoint and ask them to go through it. They will probably have a general idea of what you're talking, but they will miss out a lot of it. So you could simply use a recording tool that are available for free, such as Loom, or maybe your enterprise already has some recording tool. And you could record yourself going through the slides and explaining them, and make a little video out of it and send it as an assignment to your audience. And finally, You can also take a short video on your smartphone camera of you explaining something, explaining some concept, maybe even answering some question. And that's a great way to make a content that is more engaging and personal. Because again, that's really what we want to try to do in our online learning experience, is to maintain the social and personal aspect that we often lose when we go online. So how can you make sure that your content is effective? Well, first tip I will give you is, if you can, try to use a wide variety of media. Visual, text, audio, the more variety you have, the better. Also, that will suit the different learning style of your audience. Then try to hook your learner. Well, how do you do that? Well, maybe give your content a simple test of your own attention. Would you personally enjoy watching or reading the material you're sharing? Is there something you will find interesting or engaging? And mostly, how can you try to incorporate some humor or some impressive artwork or fascinating fact to engage your learner? As much as you can, it's really good in some ways to try to introduce an element that is maybe a little bit less serious in your training. That will keep your learner attention engaged. And finally, the most important point maybe is keep it brief. Make sure that your webinars are not over 60 to 90 minutes. About the videos I was mentioning before, of you recording your slides or taking a pre-existing webinar, make sure that they stay under 15-minute max, ideally 6 to 10 minutes. Also, you want to keep your learning around 3 hours per week. So if, for example, you have a 1-hour webinar, you can add a little thing, but you don't want to put too much in 1 week, because the more you spread your webinar over a week, and the more you give them assignment to put into practice what they just learned, the more likely they are to actually integrate and remember what they've been taught. Because oftentimes what happens is that we overwhelm our learners with a lot of knowledge, a lot of new skills, and they come out of the training and they remember only maybe 25%. So here we have the opportunity with online training to avoid this mistake that we do sometimes with classroom training, because obviously with classroom training we're bringing maybe an external trainer that is coming from far and is not going to be able to stay here for several weeks or several months. So the online training really gives us this flexibility, and we need to take advantage of that to create better learning experience. All right, so the key points from these steps is that online learning doesn't limit what content you can use, but instead it expands it. It allows you for creating a more engaging digital content. And remember, you don't have to create everything. Curate resources are already here to save some time. And don't be afraid to create your own digital resource. Even if it's a little video shot on a scrappy smartphone, it still can be effective. It doesn't need to look flashy and professional to be effective. All right, so that's it for the 4 points. Remember, the first one is to define learning objective. Then it is to break down your training into several models. Then you want to design activities that are practical, that get you learners to apply the knowledge they just gained into a real life setting. And finally, you want to curate and create new content. Yeah, I just we'll have the Q&A in a second, and the webinar is recorded, and you will receive the recording within 24 hours. It's an automatic email, so I'm not too sure exactly when it goes out, but it's going to be sent out. So just a little before we go into the Q&A, if you do need help moving your training to an online format, we can help you with this. We have experience in PLM, but also in online education. And also, if you do have any question about the presentation today that we haven't been able to answer today, don't hesitate to contact me directly. So we're going to move to our Q&A. All right. So
okay.
Heather,
let's look at the questions. Yeah, I have the questions here. So the first one we have is, can the poll be used as part of the training as interactive feedback on assignments?
Yeah. So basically, if we're talking about assignment that is happening outside of the training, the best way to do it, if you wanted to get feedback, I think that will be a really good way to use poll. It will be maybe to start your webinar, so the webinar that comes after your last assignment, and your icebreaker activity will be a way to get feedback from the assignment. So you could start this way. So definitely, I think it's a really great idea to run feedback using poll.
We actually did that on Monday in our training session. The presenter gave us a poll during the presentation to see if we knew answers to specific questions as we went through. And then we got immediate feedback to see if we were correct or incorrect. So yes. Mm-hmm. Okay, next question.
Yeah.
What are different technologies available to create online training? We'll start with the first one. It's a two-part question.
Okay, cool. So, well, again, here it depends how elaborate you want your online training to be. So here we are talking about more of a live kind of format. So here, obviously, you have all the webinar tools that exist out there. Here we're using Click Meeting. I can recommend it. It's really good, but there is, of course, a lot of other platform available out there. But then, of course, if you wanted to go maybe the next step, then you can create online course. And online course, obviously, that's something we do here, but you have a lot of tools available. Personally, we use a tool called Articulate. And then you can use also simply, well, I mean, as I was mentioning, then you have tools that are very easy, such as Loom, that allow you to record your screen while you're talking, and you can show your screen, and you can even show your camera. And so that's a really great tool that is easy to use, free. If you want to make little tutorial videos, you can, for example, if in the context of the PLM, if you want to show how to create a project using template, you could record yourself explaining, going step by step using Loom, and that will generate a link, or you can also download the video and you can share that with your audience.
Okay, the second part is, how do you keep training material updated with changing versions of software for which training is created?
Well, that is always the trick. It doesn't matter if it's online or traditional. Keeping training material is a work that will always have to happen. The great thing is that with online tool, it can be easier. So for example, if you had an online course, that will just be a question of editing your course. Obviously, it gets a bit more tricky when you have a recorded video, and that does mean that you will need to maybe re-record. Obviously, then it depends on how much the software has changed. So if it's just a little update, maybe just a side note can be enough. Just sending a screenshot of, okay, so now this button is just called like this. But of course, if there is a substantial change to your software, and you are using recorded video, that does mean you have to go back to it. But then if it's webinar, well, you can simply update your webinar. That's pretty much the same as what's going to happen with the classroom training. It is, of course, some work, but it is unfortunately something we cannot avoid.
But as you stated, like, the softwares that we use are cloud-based applications, so you're able to go in and edit courses.
Yeah.
I mean, videos, yes, you would have to re-record.
Yeah,
but other parts you can go in and edit, and in real time make the changes for everyone to see. So that part is definitely a lot better than in-person training, for example.
That's
or
true.
Using PDFs, which are a lot more of a hassle to update.
Yeah.
Okay, so we can move on to the next question. Will the webinar be available for distribution later? Yes.
Yes.
We'll send an email.
Yes. Yeah. So it's automatic.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, so I was mentioning, it's an automatic. So at the end of this webinar, you're gonna receive the recording plus my slides. It's a automated messaging, so I'm not too sure how long it takes, but I know it's no longer that 24 hours. So if by tomorrow you haven't received it, I will check and send it manually. But normally within 24 hours, you should receive the recording and the slides.
Okay, how much time do you need to create a training program?
Well, this depends obviously on the size of your training program. So just to clarify here, when you say create a training program, do you mean you already have a classroom training program, and how much time does it take to convert it, or to create from scratch? Because to create from scratch, it obviously depends how much you want to cover it. And I think he is typing right now, so I'm just going to see.
I think he's clarifying.
Okay, I'm just going to wait. From
From
scratch.
scratch.
All right. Okay, from scratch. Well, obviously that is that varies a lot on how much you want to cover. If it's, for example, if you just want to create a quick introduction to course to your PLM, that can be done relatively quickly. But if it's a big program that you want to create, that's going to take more time. It's hard to say. Maybe for onboarding course from scratch, a simple onboarding course, maybe 2 weeks to get kind of all the contents. You know, prepare to have, if you have nothing, if you don't even have any slide user training that you need to really write down, record all the videos, that will between 2 weeks and a month, I will say.
Yeah, and that will depend as well on videos and
how
make it. Those take more time.
Sorry?
So it's something, those take more time, the interactive aspect.
Yeah.
Something to take into consideration.
Yeah. It depends how much you want to, if you have more videos, that's taking more time. If it's just PowerPoint, that's a bit quicker. So it really depends on how much you want to include into your training.
Okay, so once they did the online training, if they later on need to refer back to a certain subject, what would you then propose the user do?
All right, so once they did let's first, if they did an online training that is on a course, so an online course, that's quite easy to go back to any points that have been made to the course, because you can just log back into your platform or whatever you're using and go back to the lesson that might have been something that either you need a refresher, or if you do need some further help. That's also something that is important to put in place, is the support system. So always include whatever you do, even if you do an online course or webinar training or blended approach, always mention at the beginning of the training where they need to go for support, who they need to contact. That's very important to always mention, so that they can easily go back and be like, hey, sorry, this lesson, I didn't get it. Then, if you were to do webinars and you might be wondering, okay, maybe there is a point in the webinar they didn't understand how they can, go back to it. So again, I will recommend record your webinar, make them available to them so they can rewatch it at any time. Sometimes if it's a dense subject, if it's very new to them, they might actually want to rewatch it. So record your webinar and make it available to them. I also strongly recommend that you have maybe using SharePoint, maybe using Google Drive, but you have a place, a repository where you have all the material that is available to them, and try to also organize it so it's easy for them to go back to it.
And this is another service that we offer, is creating training libraries for our clients, where we create an online page, an online space where you can take all of the resources that you already have and combine them in a well-organized platform with everything together, so that it is easier for your users to go back and find the part that they're looking for, or the lesson or search by their position in the company or the process that they're dealing with. So that is another service that we do for people as well.
Yeah, good point.
The other thing I wanted to mention about the question with creating a training program from scratch is that our next webinar will be discussing how to craft a PLM program. So an onboarding.
PLM
so we will be talking about that.
Yeah, onboarding.
So if you can make it to the next one, that would be great. All right, let's move on to the next. Let's move on to the next question. How can I do a recorded training on my website? I just have a WordPress website. Is there a way I can do it?
So just also to clarify here, you mean a recording training like a webinar, and you wanna that people are able to subscribe to your webinar directly from your website, or do you want a training about how to use the website? That's just to make sure I understand. Is he replying? Let me know if he clarifies.
Well, while he's clarifying, one way that would possible.
I think recording. It's just recording training on the webinar. Okay, so well, you can do the same as we did. So we use an external tool, which here is Click Meeting, and then on our website that is also based on WordPress, we just have the page where we have the link basically to the webinars, and people. I mean, you probably maybe if you went directly through our website, you will have seen that. Although we have all the webinar listed on our website, when you want to subscribe to a webinar, it takes you to a page on Click Meeting, which is the platform I'm using to host that webinar. And people subscribe directly on the Click Meeting, and all the webinar is run on Click Meeting. Then what you could do is once you have the recording of the webinar, download them, and then if you wanted to, you could host them on your website. But I think it's much easier than trying to incorporate directly a webinar in your website.
And when it comes to WordPress, YouTube, if you create a YouTube channel, which is free, WordPress works very well. It works perfectly with YouTube, where you can add the links and add the video inside of your page and put your training on that way as well. So
Good point.
I hope that answers that. Okay. Next question. The poll is on another platform or integrated to the eLearning platform?
So poll in most webinar platform is going to be available feature. I don't know all the webinar platform out there, but it's a very, very, very common feature. So it usually always come integrated into the platform.
Okay, next question. Sorry. Do you have any examples or teasers of online PLM training which you can share for us to see?
Yeah, we do. I don't know if the best way, maybe if you want, we can send you, because I have your email. I don't know if maybe we want to, maybe we can finish answering the question, and by the end of it, we can show you some example. I think that would be better to do that in this way. Is that okay?
And yes, we also have some recorded videos that walk through courses that we have created in the past for other people, which are available on our YouTube channel, Share PLM YouTube. Mm-hmm. So we have, I think, 2 or 3 on there as well to give you some a look into what we can do with the courses. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you provide training to people to create online training material using the technology that you use?
Provide training to people to create online training material. Well, we haven't. It's the technology we use. So the Articulate is quite easy to use. It's not something that is complicated, but we definitely like what the case scenario we're more likely to have is we created a course and then we give the course as a school material, or we give the course in the same with the same technology we use to the client, and then we help them understand how they can themselves, if they wanted to edit the course, if they wanted to add another lesson, if they wanted to delete a lesson, we show them how to use it. We don't specialize in training for the technology we use, but I mean, of course, obviously, if that's something you wanted, we can talk about that.
We do have some consulting services, so we could set up a meeting to talk more about. Everything goes by a case-to-case basis since we make everything customized. So yes, we have consulting services that we could set up with you. Set up a call. Okay. Recording training on the webinar, just like subscribing to the. Oh, okay. I think that's our questions then. These were other comments, I believe. Does anyone else have any other questions?
Question. Also.
I'm going to add a link down here in the chat for anyone that would like to set up a meeting to talk with us more about things that we can help you with and improve your training, set up a training library, anything like that. And we also want to promote our next webinar that we will be doing. Miriam, what is the date on our next?
It is, wait a second.
May 14th.
May 14th, yes, exactly. And so next webinar, we're gonna go more in detail on how you can craft PLM onboarding online experience. So it's going to be more detailed. This one was more general. It can be applied to many things. And next time we'll go more in depth. We are going to go more into details of PLM, but obviously an onboarding experience is pretty similar if you're using a SAP tool, a CRM, or so on. And plus also it's not specific to any kind of PLM. Whatever you use, it can be relevant to you. So so if you are looking to create an IT onboarding, even if you're not using a PLM, it still can help you.
And I just put that link in the chat box. So if you would like to sign up directly there, you have a link so you don't have to look for it. But yes, that will be on May 14th, which is also a Thursday, and it will be at 10:30 a.m. So like today.
Yes, correct.
So 2 weeks.
Yeah, perfect.
Okay.
Do you want Heather to maybe... Is there any other question?
Okay, I saw someone typing. I wasn't sure. Go ahead.
Okay. Oh, I was saying maybe we could show the course. You can share. I don't know if you can share your screen. I'm having little.
Yeah, I think that's a good question. If we can't figure it out yet in this one, we will do it in the next webinar.
It's just wait a second. Maybe some little issue with my screen.
We'll do it next time. No worries. We'll do it in our next webinar. So we hope to see everybody there in that one, and we will share some of that as well and send videos from our YouTube channel. We can send those in the messages.
And if you go to our website, maybe Heather, if you can put on the link, there is a link with a online free course on our website. If you can put that maybe on the chat.
Okay, and then we'll have to finish up because we've run out of time.
Yeah,
we don't want to hold people more than an hour.
No, perfect. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for coming and for listening to us. We hope that you enjoyed it, that you got something out of it. And again, if you have any other question that maybe come to your mind a bit later, don't hesitate to contact us directly. You can write to me, miriam.jenny@shareplm.com. Also directly on our website, there is a contact email. And yeah, we hope to see you to our next webinar as well.
Yes, thank you, everyone. We'll see you in the next one.
Bye.
Bye.